I spent nearly 3 decades building a bridge between the company and its clients, and now, in less than 10 minutes, all I have is an envelope containing a termination letter. A clean, cold severance. As if I were nothing more than a number on the payroll. An expense to be cut. Victoria, today is your last day. The words came from across the sleek conference table, spoken in a tone devoid of any emotion. The speaker was Ethan Carter, the new managing partner of Lockwood and Barnett Consulting, a polished man with a calculated demeanor who saw people as mere pawns to be replaced. I stared at him, trying to process what I had just heard. It felt like an invisible dagger had been plunged straight into my back. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. Was this decision thoroughly discussed? Ethan tilted his head slightly, his cold eyes full of calculation. The leadership team reached a consensus. The client relations department is being restructured to align with our new direction. We appreciate your contributions over the past 27 years. But, I'm no longer part of your plan, am I? I cut him off, unwilling to hear more corporate platitudes. Ethan shrugged, not even bothering to deny it. He slid a pale yellow envelope across the table toward me. This is your severance package. 2 months' salary along with health coverage through the end of the quarter. Janine from HR will assist you with the paperwork. I glanced at Janine, who sat beside Ethan with a tense expression. She avoided my gaze, as if not wanting to be complicit in this purge. 2 months' salary? A pitiful sum for nearly 3 decades of dedication, for the sleepless nights spent strategizing, for the times I saved contracts that were on the verge of slipping into competitors' hands. I swallowed the surge of anger rising in my throat. Does Mr. Lockwood know about this? Ethan clenched his jaw. All senior partners were informed. A blatant lie. Richard Lockwood, the company's founder, had recruited me on day 1. He once said I was the lifeblood of Lockwood and Barnett's client relations, and now he suddenly agreed to let me go without a single warning? I didn't believe it. I folded my arms, keeping my voice as calm as possible. What if I refused to sign? Ethan smirked slightly. We can't force you, but I don't think you'd want to make things difficult. That would affect your benefits, and, per company policy, you may pack up your belongings under security supervision. I let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. They weren't just firing me, they were treating me like a criminal, a threat that needed to be monitored. I looked down at the envelope in front of me. 2 months' pay, and an insult. Did they really think I would accept this without protest? But I didn't sign. Not yet. Instead, I rose from my chair, slowly, deliberately. If this is how you treat loyalty, I understand. Ethan showed no reaction, but Janine looked uncomfortable. Maybe she recognized how unfair this was, but she couldn't do anything about it. I walked out of the conference room with the envelope in my hand, but my mind felt blank. The years I had spent at this company flashed through my mind like a fast-forwarded film. The contracts I had salvaged, the clients I had maintained, the nights I had worked late to ensure the right strategy was in place. And in return, an abrupt, cold farewell. When I reached my desk, a young security guard was already waiting there, looking at me apologetically. Miss Pearson, would you like some help packing? I stared at him. I didn't blame him, but the way this company discarded people made me feel suffocated. No thank you. I started packing my belongings carefully. A photo with my client team at a charity gala. Thank you letters from executives whose deals I had helped salvage. A crystal award Richard Lockwood had given me on my 20th work anniversary. Engraved with the words, "Thank you for everything you've built." A hollow, meaningless thank you. As I sealed the box, my phone vibrated. A message. Victoria, just heard about this morning, call me ASAP. Amanda Grayson, CEO of Grayson Industries, Lockwood and Barnett's largest client. I frowned. Ethan Carter seemed to believe that a simple email could replace me in the eyes of my clients. But he didn't understand that relationships weren't something that could be transferred, like a contact list. He didn't realize that my game was only just beginning. I stood outside the Lockwood and Barnett building, the weight of my belongings pressing down on my arms. A cold breeze swept past, but the numbness I felt wasn't from the weather. It came from the harsh reality that I had just been cast aside from the company I had dedicated 27 years of my life to. My phone vibrated inside my coat pocket, Amanda Grayson's name flashing on the screen. I answered. "Victoria, what the hell is going on?" Amanda's voice was sharp as a blade. No pleasantries, no small talk. I had known her long enough to understand. When Amanda asked a question, she expected an immediate answer. "I just found out this morning. Ethan Carter fired me under the excuse of restructuring." There was a brief silence before Amanda snapped. "Are they out of their minds? Do they think I'll accept some clueless idiot handling my contract?" I could picture her face. Piercing blue eyes, clenched jaw. One hand gripping the desk as if ready to flip it over. "Who's replacing you?" "I'm not sure, probably one of the junior associates." Amanda let out a humorless laugh. "A junior associate? Jesus, Victoria, you're the only person I trust at that firm. You know how to handle complex issues, you know how to negotiate contracts with legal, and most importantly, you understand our needs. No one else can do that." I knew that. But Ethan Carter didn't. "I need to see you," Amanda continued. "Send me your location, I'll be there." Before I could respond, my screen lit up with another incoming call. Brandon Hale, CEO of Sterling Technologies, one of the firm's most critical clients. I stared at the screen. Ethan Carter had made a grave mistake. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in a small cafe downtown. Across from me, Amanda Grayson placed her cappuccino on the table with more force than necessary, her anger still simmering. "I can't believe they pulled this kind of stupidity. Do you realize we just renewed a 3-year contract with Lockwood and Barnett solely because you were overseeing it?" I nodded. A deal worth nearly $5 million per year, one of the largest contracts I had ever negotiated. "Do you know what I'm going to do, Victoria?" Amanda arched a brow. "I'm calling Ethan right now and telling him that if you don't come back, I'll be reevaluating our contract immediately." I shook my head. "Amanda, I appreciate that, but Ethan won't care. He thinks I can be replaced easily." "Then he's an idiot." "He is, but he'll realize his mistake soon enough." Amanda narrowed her eyes, as if trying to figure out what I was planning. Before she could ask, my phone vibrated again. A message from Brandon Hale. "Victoria, heard about this morning, we need to talk. Call me when you can." And it didn't stop there. A second later, an email from Derek Vaughn, CFO of Westbridge Manufacturing, another longtime client. "Hi Victoria, just heard you're no longer with Lockwood and Barnett. Can we talk? I have some things to discuss." I looked at my screen, feeling my pulse quicken. Amanda watched me, then smirked knowingly. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" She leaned forward. "Ethan Carter doesn't realize he just set off a ticking time bomb." I smiled. "Let's see how he handles the fallout." The next morning, as I was getting ready to leave my apartment for a meeting with one of my clients, an unknown number appeared on my screen. "Victoria Pearson, correct? This is Michael Forrester from the Boston Business Journal." I frowned. "How can I help you?" "We're investigating the leadership changes at Lockwood and Barnett Consulting. I have information that several major clients are reconsidering their contracts following your departure. Do you have any comments on this?" I smiled slightly, knowing I needed to be careful. "I have no comments on Lockwood and Barnett's internal decisions." "What about the fact that key clients are now demanding contract reviews after your termination?" he pressed. I knew exactly how to answer. "I can't control my clients' decisions, but I believe business relationships aren't just built on contracts, they're built on trust, and when trust is broken, consequences follow naturally." "What are your next plans?" I paused, glancing out the window where the morning sunlight was filtering through the skyscrapers. "Wait and see." I hung up. Amanda was right. Ethan Carter didn't realize he had just destroyed his own career. And I didn't have to do a thing, my clients were doing it for me. 3 days after leaving Lockwood and Barnett, my phone hadn't stopped ringing. News of my termination had spread across the consulting industry, and the aftershocks were becoming increasingly clear. Clients were demanding contract reviews, some even suspending their partnerships indefinitely. I knew Ethan Carter was scrambling to contain the situation. But that wasn't my problem anymore. This morning, just as I poured my first cup of coffee, my phone screen lit up with a name that made me pause. Richard Lockwood. I set my cup down, staring at the name. The founder of Lockwood and Barnett, the man who had hired me on day one. Yet when Ethan Carter decided to fire me, he hadn't intervened. I answered the call. Victoria. Richard's voice carried a trace of exhaustion, though he maintained his usual composed tone. I just got back from London and heard about what happened. I never approved this decision. I remained silent for a moment. A part of me wanted to believe him, another part did not. So you called to apologize? I kept my tone neutral. Richard sighed. I called to make things right. I want you to come back. I let out a quiet laugh, devoid of any satisfaction. Come back? So I can be tossed aside again the next time Ethan needs a restructuring? No, thank you. Ethan overstepped. I'm working to regain control. Our major clients are panicking. Many are threatening to pull their contracts. They want you, not anyone else. You, Victoria. I folded my arms, leaning back in my chair. So you don't actually want me back because I matter. You want me back because the company is collapsing. A long silence stretched across the line. I don't deny that we need you. But I also know I let the situation go too far. If I had been here, this wouldn't have happened. But it did happen. I emphasized every word. I was thrown out in the most humiliating way possible. You didn't stop it. And now that the company is falling apart, you expect me to come back and clean up the mess? Richard struggled to keep his voice steady. I understand your frustration. But let me make it up to you. I'll create a new position for you, Chief Executive of Client Relations, reporting directly to me, bypassing Ethan. Higher salary, more autonomy. It was a compelling offer. But I didn't respond immediately. I had learned an important lesson. Loyalty is the easiest thing to discard when it no longer serves someone else's interests. I need time to think. Don't take too long, Victoria. The company can't afford to lose more clients. I ended the call without making any promises. 3 hours later, I was sitting in the office of Elliott & Co., one of Lockwood and Barnett's top competitors. Across from me, Melissa Reed, the company's head of HR, placed a contract on the table. We're very interested in having you on our team, Victoria. I skimmed through the contract, my brow lifting slightly at the figure. Twice my previous salary. Melissa smiled at my reaction. We know you have options. But consider this. If you go back to Lockwood and Barnett, you'll be fighting against a system that already betrayed you once. Here, you'll be working with people who truly value what you bring to the table. She wasn't wrong. Before I could respond, my phone vibrated again. A message from Michael Harris, CEO of Blackwell Consulting. Victoria, I have an interesting offer for you. Meet me tonight? I set my phone down and looked at Melissa. I can't make a decision just yet, but I'll give it serious thought. She nodded, unsurprised. I understand. But remember, we don't just want you for your skills. You're the person clients trust. That's something no company can replicate. I left her office with one undeniable truth in mind. I wasn't the one looking for a job. I was the one they all needed. That evening I walked into an upscale restaurant downtown where Michael Harris had reserved a table. Victoria, it's great to see you. He stood up, extending his hand. I took my seat, studying the man in front of me. Michael wasn't one for unnecessary small talk. We want you at Blackwell. He got straight to the point. Why? We're expanding into new markets, and we need someone who can bring in major clients. And given Lockwood and Barnett's current situation, I think you're the one to help us do that. And in return? Michael smiled, sliding an envelope toward me. I opened it and scanned the contents. Double the salary. Equity in the company. Full control to build my own team. I looked up. I'll think about it. Michael tilted his head, his gaze sharp. Victoria, you don't need Lockwood and Barnett, but they need you. You realize that, don't you? I smiled, taking a sip of wine. I knew it all too well. A week after I left Lockwood and Barnett, the company was in chaos. Clients were pulling contracts en masse. The media had started questioning the sudden downfall of a firm that was once a pillar in the consulting industry. I hadn't lifted a finger. Ethan Carter had dug his own grave. That morning, as I sat in a high-end cafe discussing details with Michael Harris from Blackwell Consulting, my phone rang. The name on the screen made me smile slightly. Richard Lockwood. Michael raised an eyebrow. They're desperate now, aren't they? I nodded. And I'm guessing this call is the final offer. I answered. Victoria. Richard's voice was noticeably lower than in our last conversation. Hello, Richard, what's the matter? I'll get straight to the point. The board held an emergency meeting last night. They voted to remove Ethan Carter from his position as managing partner. I let out a small laugh. That was fast. The losses were too great, Richard sighed. We've lost nearly 50% of our client value in less than 2 weeks. The shareholders are furious, and the investors are out of patience. I took a sip of my coffee, waiting for what would come next. I want you back, Victoria. As the executive partner of client relations. Full authority, reporting directly to me. I glanced at Michael, who was watching me with interest. I knew he was waiting to see what I would say. I let Richard sit in silence for a few seconds before responding. I'm sorry, Richard, but I'm not coming back. He was quiet for a long moment. Why? I'm offering you a higher position. Everything you ever wanted. I leaned forward slightly, keeping my tone calm. Because Lockwood and Barnett is no longer the company I believed in. The values I built there have been destroyed. Now it's all about short-term numbers. No one actually cares about the clients anymore. We can change that, Richard tried to reason. We can get the company back on track. Not with a foundation that's already rotten. Silence. I could feel his frustration through the phone. So, this is final? Yes. I'm joining Blackwell Consulting. Richard took a deep breath, as if trying to contain his anger. So, you're choosing to walk away for good? No. I paused before continuing. I'm choosing to move forward. After hanging up, I set my phone down and looked at Michael. They won't last much longer, he remarked. I nodded. Lockwood and Barnett destroyed itself. Now it's time for me to move on. Michael slid an envelope toward me. Your contract, Victoria. Welcome to Blackwell. I opened it, scanning the terms. Partnership rights. Full control over client management. A significant equity stake. Finally, I signed. Michael smiled. What do you think Ethan Carter is doing right now? I let out a quiet laugh. Probably realizing he just made the biggest mistake of his life. 3 months after joining Blackwell Consulting, I sat in my office, looking out over the Boston skyline. The coffee on my desk had gone cold, but I didn't care. On my laptop screen was the final document I needed to review before sending it off. The acquisition agreement for Lockwood and Barnett. I took a deep breath, then clicked. Sin. The company I had dedicated 27 years to was now about to become part of Blackwell. A fitting ending for those who saw me as disposable. Lockwood and Barnett's all-company meeting took place on Monday morning in the largest conference room at headquarters. The employees gathered, their faces tense as they looked toward the stage where Richard Lockwood stood beside the board members. The company had been in turmoil for the past 3 months. Clients leaving, reputation crumbling, employees resigning one after another. Richard tapped the microphone lightly, his voice carrying a hopeful tone. Today I have an important announcement. The room fell silent. Lockwood and Barnett has secured a new partnership, an opportunity to rebuild our reputation and regain our standing in the industry. Murmurs spread through the audience. Richard cleared his throat and forced a confident smile. We are pleased to announce that Victoria Pearson will be returning to lead our client relations division. A wave of shocked whispers rippled through the room. I rose from my seat in the front row and stepped onto the stage, feeling every set of eyes locked on me. Richard looked at me with relief, perhaps believing he had finally convinced me to come back. I remained composed, lifted the microphone, and scanned the room. "Thank you, Richard, but there's something I need to clarify." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle before continuing. "I am not returning to Lockwood and Barnett as an employee. I'm standing here today to announce that Blackwell Consulting, with financial backing from R&H Capital, has officially completed the acquisition of this company." The room froze. Richard stiffened, his grip tightening on the microphone. The board members exchanged wide-eyed glances. A few employees gaped in shock, while others broke into hushed, frantic whispers. "What?" Richard stammered. I held his gaze. "As of today, Lockwood and Barnett belongs to Blackwell Consulting. We will be taking over all business operations, including clients, personnel, and organizational structure." Richard stared at me, struggling to regain his composure. "How long have you been planning this?" I smiled, my voice steady. "Not long. But certainly after you chose to place your loyalty in the wrong person." A wave of tension rolled through the room. Richard turned to the board members. But no one spoke. They had already known. I continued. "We have no intention of implementing mass layoffs, but changes will be made, and one of the first is ensuring that this company returns to its core values, its clients and its people." I stepped aside, making way for Michael Harris, CEO of Blackwell. He took the stage, his commanding presence sweeping across the room. "Blackwell believes that Lockwood and Barnett holds enormous potential, but it has been mismanaged for too long. We will put this company back on the right track, and the best person to lead that effort is none other than Victoria Pearson." Applause erupted from employees, sharp enough to grasp what was happening. Others remained frozen in disbelief. Richard looked at me one last time, his eyes filled with disappointment and bitterness. "You won." I shrugged. "I only did what you should have done a long time ago." Richard gave a slow nod, then stepped down from the stage, silently leaving the conference room. The meeting ended and I walked out, met with handshakes, congratulations, and wary glances from former colleagues. Michael Harris leaned in close, his voice low. "How does it feel to take over the company that once fired you?" I took a deep breath, feeling nothing but calm satisfaction. "It's not revenge, it's a correction." We walked out of the conference room, leaving behind a company on the brink of its greatest transformation. I hadn't just returned. I had reclaimed everything. On my own terms. 3 months after Blackwell Consulting completed the acquisition of Lockwood and Barnett, I sat in my new office, looking down at the bustling city of Boston below. The surroundings were still familiar, but the atmosphere within the company was entirely different. No more fear. No more pointless meetings discussing cost-cutting instead of focusing on clients. We had retained most of the team, only removing those who no longer aligned with the new direction. And the results spoke for themselves. Clients were returning, the company's reputation was being restored, revenue was exceeding expectations. I opened a personnel report, scanning the latest updates. Dominic Carter, no longer employed. I smiled slightly. A few weeks ago, Dominic had one final meeting with the board before being removed for good. He had tried to justify his failures, blaming market conditions and unexpected client decisions. But everyone knew the truth. He had destroyed himself. After being dismissed from Lockwood and Barnett, Dominic ended up at a small, obscure consulting firm. No reputation, no lucrative contracts like the ones he was once accustomed to. Those who had once flattered him quickly turned their backs, avoiding him as if he were a plague. The last I heard, Dominic was trying to regain his footing in the industry by applying for mid-level positions, but no one truly trusted him anymore. Everything he had built through ruthless decisions, now reduced to dust. And Richard Lockwood? After the shock of that company-wide meeting, he had no choice but to accept a consulting role, without any real power. Blackwell was too smart to discard him outright. After all, he was still a company founder with valuable experience. but he was no longer in control of this firm's future. For the first time in his career, Richard was forced to sit on the sidelines, watching others make the big decisions, without being able to intervene. And the person he now reported to? One morning as I was reviewing a new contract, my assistant stepped in. "Victoria. Mr. Lockwood would like to see you." I nodded, closed my file, and walked into the private conference room. Richard was already seated, looking more worn than before. I pulled out a chair and waited for him to speak. "I have to admit, you played a perfect game." His voice was low. "I did what needed to be done." Richard let out a faint, humorless chuckle. "If I could go back 3 months, I would have done everything differently. I was wrong to trust Dominic. Wrong to think I could control the situation. And I lost you." I said nothing, letting him face the truth on his own. "Finally," I replied, "your biggest mistake wasn't trusting Dominic, it was failing to value the people who helped build this company from the beginning." Richard nodded slowly, as if finally understanding what he should have realized long ago. 6 months later, I stepped out of the boardroom alongside Michael Harris, CEO of Blackwell. We had just finalized the quarterly financial report. "Revenue is up 27% compared to last year," Michael said, his voice filled with pride. "And our client retention rate is at 96%. I added. "Not bad for a company that was on the brink of collapse, huh?" I smiled. "Not bad at all." We exited the building, the afternoon sunlight casting long shadows on the crowded sidewalk. "Do you regret not going back to Lockwood and Barnett?" Michael asked. I shook my head. "No. Because I never truly left." Michael raised an eyebrow, waiting for me to elaborate. I turned to him, my voice steady. "I didn't come back to be an employee, I came back to own it." That evening as I sat in my private office, looking out at the glowing streets of Boston, I realized something. In the professional services industry, real assets aren't numbers on a report, they aren't brand names, they aren't hastily signed contracts. They are people, they are trust. They are the lasting relationships built over time. Lockwood and Barnett forgot that, and they paid the price. I took a sip of wine, feeling satisfaction, not from revenge, but from proving I was right. Sometimes, justice doesn't need a courtroom. It doesn't need a verdict. It only requires patience, and the truth will reveal itself. Victoria's story is not just a lesson in betrayal and retribution. It is undeniable proof of the value of people in any organization. In reality, many companies treat their employees as numbers, easily discarded in pursuit of short-term profit, forgetting that relationships and trust are priceless assets. When a business loses the people who create real value, it ultimately destroys its own foundation. Justice doesn't always require revenge. Sometimes, it simply requires patience and letting the truth speak for itself. Victoria's story is a testament to the fact that true value doesn't lie in a job title, but in trust and perseverance. What do you think of her decision? If you were in her place, what would you have done differently? Share your thoughts, and don't forget to follow the channel for more compelling stories about life, family, and real-world justice.